Homefront is an aggressively mediocre game. I feel like that's common knowledge at this point. Mostly forgotten off malign, this game was one of the first cracks in old-school THQ's modest empire, part of their push towards core games in the AAA space. Of course, that push didn't work out, and then things crumbled for a number of reasons, and now it was formerly Nordic Games is wearing their skin like a suit, and embracing the brand's AA and licensed roots. But I'm not here to cover that particular train wreck, nor even the mess that was Homefront's development. I want to talk about the game itself, now almost 10 years on. For every game, there is always some glint of promise, at least in premise, that gets people excited and buoys it through to release. And in Homefront's case, the promise very much was the premise. That of a shooter set in an occupied version of small-town America and penned by John Milius, the writer behind the 1984 classic Red Dawn. How much he actually contributed to Homefront is in debate though, with the final word seeming to be that he was a story consultant at best. Full disclosure, I've never actually seen Red Dawn. Any familiarity I have with it comes from pop culture osmosis. Wolverines! But I can't appreciate the inherent appeal of that premise, especially for a 7th-gen military shooter. It's relatively novel, and allows for settings that are evocative by being familiar, rather than the war-torn Middle Eastern and Eastern European backdrops you often saw at the time. If you're in North America, then you probably have an idea of what the Best Buy should look like on any given day, less so the hills of rural Afghanistan. Hell, one of the most memorable modern Call of Duty moments banked on that same concept, and explicitly referenced Red Dawn, the level Wolverines in Modern Warfare 2, where you defend the high holy institution of Burger Town. And that certainly wasn't the last time COD used that trope. But the thing with Call of Duty's dalliances with such set pieces is that they were just set pieces. They went all out on visual design for those moments, and thanks to the breakneck pace of a standard COD plot, you never really had time to consider the why and how of Russians invading Main Street USA. Homefront takes the opposite tact, and ends up feeling overwritten and underbaked as a result. With that spoiler for my final thoughts out of the way, let's talk about the lore here. The elevator pitch was that the North Koreans had invaded and occupied the USA. Of course, anyone with even the slightest grasp on global power dynamics can see how far-fetched that is, and so the story ties itself into knots in order to force it to make sense. And before I start untangling said knots, I'll address the red elephant in the room. According to interviews, originally China was supposed to be the occupying force. Not wanting to deal with the backlash or leave any potential future yuan on the table, THQ changed it over. So how does North Korea become a major world superpower? And by that same token, how does the United States get brought down so low? Thankfully, there is a harshly edited and quickly paced opening montage to cover some of what happened in Homefront's alt history canon. Long story short, Kim Jong-il dies and his son, Kim Jong-un, takes over, as happened in real life. However, in Homefront's universe, he is apparently a font of charisma, and manages to unite North and South Korea. No real word on how he does this exactly. Reading over the lore notes I managed to find, Homefront just mumbles something about nationalism and the Chosen Kingdom, and then hand-waves that minor detail of ending a decades-long conflict aside. Anyways, from there, they managed to absorb Japan, Malaysia, and a number of other East Asian countries, and then start inserting themselves into the US's world police persona. No mention of China during all this, naturally. Apparently, they're just taking it easy as a direct neighbor becomes increasingly expansionist and aggressive. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, the USA is having a run of bad luck that borders on divine punishment. Things in the Middle East have taken a turn, and Saudi Arabia and Iran are now at war, causing gas prices to skyrocket and devastating the US economy. This is then followed by the American financial system bottoming out, striking right at those raw 2008 recession nerves there, which would have been topical at the time, and leading to utter mass hysteria, famine, and social unrest. Also, they then get hit by a bird flu epidemic and a record-breaking cold snap. You know, lives lost in the millions. At this point, finally, the GKR, Greater Korean Republic, launches a friendly, helpful GPS satellite. That, of course, turns out to be an orbital weapon, which creates an EMP that fries most of the country's electrical system and radiates the Mississippi. Like, all of it. After all this, they finally invade and take over the western half of the United States. That is very much the Cliff Notes version of things, with there being a whopping 61 lore notes to find in the game that provide honestly way too much extra detail. Each one feels like them further crawling down a rabbit hole of justification to make their political fanfiction seem even semi-plausible. Getting to the actual story, we start off waking up in a shitty apartment so the KPA can immediately knock down our door and bring us in. From there, we're led onto a bus so we can take in the splendor and scenery of Homefront's It's a Small Dystopia ride. You get your poor and huddled masses being beaten in the streets, people carted off to work camps, and of course that old chestnut of murdering a child's parents in front of them and letting them cry in the street.
Just don't think about it, just close your eyes!
Definitely comes off as harsh stuff, but you also get no time to really take it in, have it mean anything. These few moments are all you'll really get to see of what life looks like under the KPA's boot, before your bus gets T-boned by a truck and everything goes all Call of Duty on you. It's at this point you're introduced to Resistance members Connor and Rihanna, who rescue/kidnap and immediately conscript you. You're going to spend basically the entire rest of the game with these two, so naturally they're about as layered and interesting as single-ply toilet paper. Rihanna is almost a non-entity. She has no backstory or real defining characteristics. Her emotions and reactions just kind of flow with the situation. She's angry or sad or shocked when it makes sense, but none of that emotion is ever set up, so there's no real payoff. You spend more time with Connor, and he has slightly more going on, by which I mean he's just kind of angry. One might assume he's got an anti-authoritarian prepper mindset from his general demeanor, and, the Gadsden flag t-shirt kind of a giveaway. That's something that might lend the slightest bit of texture to the proceedings, but no, he's just got a vague, impertinent sort of anger. He leads the way most of the time, but also causes most of the problems, getting into shitty situations, all with no real personal rationale or motivation. Not an uncommon archetype for a military shooter, and nothing is really done with it here. From your rescue onwards, you get led to the suburbs, engaging with KPA patrols along the way, and now is as good a time as any to talk about the gameplay. Overall, it's just your standard military shooter affair. Get into cover, pop drop, whip out grenades when you're feeling spicy. There are the odd set pieces, we'll get to those, but even they are nothing more than derringer, sniping, vehicle, and tech bits. The sort of thing you expect from this kind of game. And to be clear, I don't actually hate this formula. I'm more of a boomer shooter guy when it comes to FPS, but I can appreciate the tactical approach of this style. However, whether your COD clone is good or not really all hinges on one key thing. The guns. Do they feel good to shoot? Is there a decent variety? Do they feel meaningfully and functionally different? Do they have interesting but recognizable silhouettes? Sadly, Homefront fails on more or less all of these counts. Your arsenal is very by the numbers and off-the-rack looking, neither embellished or true to life enough to feel striking. It's largely assault rifles with the odd LMG, semi-auto rifle, pistol, sniper rifle, and shotgun thrown in. The variety may sound impressive, but those exotic arms aren't exactly spread around all that liberally. Not that it really matters, this is the kind of shooter where you can stick with an LMG for most of a level, because they make it functionally just an assault rifle with more ammo. There's little noticeable recoil, accuracy only varies slightly between weapons, and headshots work as expected. So your choice of bang bang ends up falling largely to personal preference. There is a system where it'll spawn random attachments like scopes, grenade launchers, and master keys on weapons, and that will define what you use more than anything else. It's better to have a scope or backup shotty than nothing at all. The real killer here, though, is the lack of weight in the animations, both yours and the enemies when you're shooting them, assuming you can see them in the cacophony. They'll slump accordingly when shot, but they don't really get thrown back or staggered in a way that would feel impactful. Same goes for your own animations, with that lack of recoil really making it feel like you're shooting paintballs. To their credit, the grenades at least feel good. Really good. There's a fantastic arc present in your throw that feels natural but still gives that rush of skillful serotonin when you drop one in from downtown. Similarly, they have the force you want from a grenade. The explosion is nice and loud, and dudes get pleasantly launched B-movie style when they go off. Not every game, especially these kinds of military shooters, get that right. Instead, they'll have pitiful little pop crackers in place of real munitions. So, kudos to Homefront where it's due. Anyways, the chapter finishes off with you meeting up with Boone, the local resistance cell leader who is trying to calm down the squatters living in the suburbs who are worried about you shooting up the place and attracting patrols. Naturally, you then shoot up the place, because you've attracted patrols, with the KPA immediately rolling up in force. Homefront tries for just a little bit here to make this feel like a dire situation in which you're endangering civilians using a screaming child as shorthand for shit's fucked, but then quickly moves on so the Resistance can give you a new toy. Specifically, they hand you the remote control to their autonomous super death truck that eats APCs for breakfast. Because we're the underdogs. After pointing and clicking things to death for like a minute, a big explosion happens and you get knocked into the next chapter. One concussion later, you're waking up in a child's bedroom in the Resistance's way more conspicuous than they think suburban base. You've got some time before the next inane step in their plan, so Boone gives you a brief tour and lets you spend a few minutes taking in Homefront's attempt at world building. This base is the perfect example of Homefront's approach to presentation, which can be broken down to very pretty screenshots, unfortunately crappy assets. There are a lot of moments in this game that can be downright picturesque if you frame it right and just take it all in. But the second you break that framing and move up and get a good look at the models and textures, it all falls apart. Janky animations, ugly models, a completely static, low-res skybox, and just weird design choices. Things like the fact this self-sufficient base seems to only grow tomatoes. Oh god, so many tomatoes. Comes across as lazy, but then you see things like the actual composed text on these newspaper clippings, or this totally decent, for the time, looped canning animation, both of which are never used again. It baffles the mind. Why spend clear time and effort on fucking tomato canning, only to have your skybox that players will see far more of look like dog shit? If the game blew past this moment and didn't expect you to take a second glance, it'd be one thing. But this base is where you're explicitly told to take your time and look around. If you were going to push a consistent level of visual polish anywhere, this was the spot. Anyways, once you shake off the base's weird tomato-flavored vibe, you go meet up with Hopper and get on with your mission. Right, Hopper. I totally forgot about him in the last mission. He was there, certainly, and will nominally tag around for the rest of the game, but he's your support/tech guy, so you don't really spend much shoulder-to-shoulder time with him. Outside of holding the leash for your monster death truck, he's mostly used to spark moments of forced commentary on the racism. Not much of it, mind you. This campaign is 4 hours long at best, and Homefront has the attention span of an especially stressed gnat. So a treatise on racial enmity, this is not. With the gang now properly in tow, we go all of one block from the highly secure base and encounter our first sentry tower. These are gimmick enemies, for lack of a better term. Smart turrets that will sweep a spotlight back and forth and fire on anything that moves. Not exactly the most original threat in the world, and avoiding them is easy enough thanks to the liberally provided cover. That said, they are probably one of my favorite parts of the game, to be honest, because they demand the use of grenades. Taking them out requires you to huck a hot potato underneath it, which leads to a satisfying explosion made all the sweeter if you've made that throw from as far back as you can. Sadly, the game gives you very few opportunities to play ballistic basketball, but you have to take your fun where you can. Once it's down, you keep pushing through houses, fighting more KPA as you go because they're apparently entrenched in every goddamn backyard. You push through to the middle school, and after getting a sneak preview of the next level's big twist, it comes out that Boone got tagged by the sentry tower on the way here, so he's going to be bowing out for the rest of this mission. This leaves you, Hopper, and Connor to finish things up, your mission being to apparently steal some tracking beacons from a KPA work camp. The overall Resistance plan is also very quickly detailed here. You're stealing the beacons so you can then break into a KPA depot and tag some fuel tankers. Then you need to destroy a massive fuck-off wall that's built here in nowhere, Colorado for some reason. Also, you can go get a helicopter, chase down the trucks, hijack them, and take them to a somehow still surviving US Army regiment in San Francisco. Now, I have a number of questions about this whole setup, like why we're bothering with beacons and helicopters when we could just grab some uniforms and steal the trucks from the depot, or how in the hell any sizable chunk of the US military has managed to survive on the occupation's doorstep, but Homefront has no answers for me, so let's move on to the work camp. The work camp is just the Resistance base, but sad. Another brief walking tour through questionable assets and animations built to hammer home once again that shit is indeed fucked. Thankfully, this one is pretty brief, and you'll quickly meet up with your inside contact, Arnie, who's apparently been coordinating with Boone. Turns out he's been coordinating with the KPA as well, because he turns a gun on you less than 5 minutes after you meet him, springing a trap that's, honestly, one of the more annoying combat encounters in this level. You do get to discover this game's almost endearing love of the 2000s sound in this moment, so all is forgiven in my mind. Anyways, after escaping the trap and shooting the place up, you steal the beacons and, of course, only the beacons, making sure that even if Arnie hadn't already told them your whole plan, they would now know to carefully check any outgoing transports or vehicles for tracking beacons. But don't think about that, because Homefront instead wants you to focus on its infamous mass grave scene, which immediately follows. You take a turn into the baseball field and come across them dumping bodies, leading Connor to go full Rambo.
Thrown into a pit like garbage. How many people are in this ditch? You sons of bitches. Scumbag motherfuckers! You motherfuckers!
2 more sentry towers and a bucket full of grunts later, you come up face to face with the dread pit and everybody gets all solemn. I remember this scene being a big media talking point back when this game launched. Some calling it stirring, more people calling it hokey, but what sticks out to me is how much the reaction of the characters and the one expected of the player just doesn't really fit. It's a mass grave, sure, and that's certainly unpleasant. But we just seen the work camp, the wanton devastation of areas packed with civilians, and once again, parents shot in the streets in front of their children.
Just don't think about it. Just close your eyes.
At this point, why is a mass grave in any way surprising or shocking? Did you think they were carefully burying and giving last rites to all those people they worked to death or gunned down for a step out of line? As a result, it comes off as hollow in my eyes, a cheap attempt to make the player feel distraught. That cheap feeling is hammered home even further when they then ask you to swan dive into the heat to avoid an incoming KPA helicopter. Between the butt prompt for it and the fact that you still have some amount of camera control, it just dully shatters any remaining tension. It's in this moment that Colonel Jiang, the same official who busted into your apartment earlier, shows up and orders his men to fire into the pit in case you're hiding in there. Somehow they miss you, despite you barely being hidden. Regardless, this satisfies your erstwhile antagonist, and knowing he'll catch you when you next meet, he gets into his helicopter and the level ends. Joke's on him though, despite being one of only a handful of named characters, he never appears in this game again. Moving on from the corpse pile and presumably an off-screen shower, the Scooby Gang piles into the mystery machine along with a mortar launcher for the war crime that was teased in the last level. Despite stealth being the smarter option here, our crew has decided a more direct approach is in order, because this game needed another set piece if it was going to try to compete with Call of Duty. Enter everybody's favorite morality killer, White Phosphorus, and a full year before Spec Ops did, no less. As expected, the modern equivalent of mustard gas is treated like a big deal, and everyone acts all distressed, especially when the aiming on the second volley is screwed up, and it ends up falling on the resistance forces as well. That said, any semblance of tension is immediately dispelled when a shell explodes directly over the sniping position you and Rihanna had taken up, raining fire down upon you and doing absolutely nothing. You fall from the roof, very pointedly not on fire, and lightly jog your way across the parking lot to cover, only to be interrupted by a goddamn Wilhelm scream. In 0 to 60, they've taken what should have been one of the more striking moments of the game and turned it into a damn B-movie. Basking in the glow of what should be an atrocity, this seems like as good a time as any to point out that this whole scene has been taking place in the parking lot of a Tiger Direct. If you don't remember what Tiger Direct is, it was a crappy version of Best Buy. To put it bluntly, this game loves product placement, even if the brands it managed to secure weren't necessarily top tier, even for the time.
We're in the money, we're in the money. We've got a lot of what it takes to get along. We're in the money, the sky is sunny. Oh man, depression, you are through, you done us wrong.
But here's the thing. For as goofy as that out-of-context montage was, product placement is not inherently bad, especially for a game like this that is meant to evoke a sense of familiarity and realism. When used properly in such a context, a little branding can be extremely immersive and help elevate things. Homefront, however, does not use its product placement properly. Part of this comes down to the brands they were able to secure and the prominence they're given. I'm going to go out on a limb and say there is not a single town in America that has multiple White Castles and no McDonald's. And by that same token, there is no business buying, I'm pretty sure were never manufactured, full throttle or NOS machines when a Coke or Pepsi machine would be readily available. But worse than that is how those brands end up represented in the world of Homefront. If you're going to go to the trouble of licensing a recognizable restaurant, and then let the player go inside that restaurant, you should make at least a token effort to build something that looks like that restaurant. For reference, here is what a Hooters looks like in real life. And here's one in Homefront. Notice anything missing? Well, there's no wings on the menu, that's a pretty big omission. No wood paneling or big TVs, those are pretty distinctive and evocative of what Hooters is. Oh, and there's one other minor thing. There's no damn kitchen. Not only does this place not look like a Hooters, it doesn't look like a restaurant, period. The White Castle you run through later has the same issue. There's no kitchen and the front counter is completely disconnected from the back. The studio that made this was based in New York. I'm pretty sure they could have walked not even a block from their office and gone into a fast food restaurant to get reference of how they're generally laid out. Speaking of poorly built imitations of real-world locations, let's get back to the story. After a short assault out front, our team enters the Tiger Direct, which is naturally laid out like a Walmart with cramped spaces and high shelves. Pretty sure it even has dressing rooms, which... no. And then they proceed to cause a whole shit ton of noise as they murder their way to the back of the store and out the door. Once outside, we make a mad dash for the trucks, plant the beacons, and then head back inside the now wildly on fire Tiger Direct. After inhaling several cubic meters of smoke, you escape via the roof, blow up a few jeeps with your super truck for kicks, and then move on to the next chapter. With our shopping done, we head back to base to inform Boone of our roaring success, only to be greeted by a roaring fire and Boone's strung up corpse. It seems while we were gone, the KPA found the base, murdered the inhabitants, and stole all the tomatoes just to be petty. I'm not going to ask how they found the base. It was not well hidden and was located literally throwing distance from several patrol routes, but there is one thing that really bugs me about this scene. Why did the KPA decide to make a display out of Boone? He was the leader, I suppose, but only of this cell, which isn't even the only one in this small town. Judging by the fact that there wasn't an ambush waiting for us, they didn't even booby-trap the place. I have to imagine they thought they got everyone, so it doesn't make sense to leave him up as a brutal jester. It also doesn't really jive with how the KPA forces have been portrayed up to this point. So far, their acts of wanton cruelty have all come off as very indifferent, dispassionate. This is not some blood feud. They clearly think of themselves as just putting down rabid dogs and, massive quotes, stabilizing the region. So going to the trouble to prop up Boone like this feels out of character. I have my suspicions that something was cut here. Maybe we were supposed to get ambushed by Jiang again, so that an actual antagonist could be responsible for this act. Well, regardless, speaking of fuzzy character writing, the crew's response to this development is a little strange too. Rihanna is completely distraught over Boone. For like 5 minutes. Hopper says nothing, but not in like a solemn way, he just takes a knee, he's tired. And Connor, despite losing his shit at that mass grave earlier, can barely summon up a hearty
Motherfuckers.
before moving along. After the game quickly glosses over that fleeting glimpse of something resembling actual drama, our team gets moving so they can start the next phase of the plan to destroy the Big Wall. It's odd that neither Boone's death nor the base's destruction hinders that plan in any way, but whatever. Also, the implication here is that we're doing this directly after our Black Friday blow in the last level, which means no rest for the insipid, I suppose. Anyways, on our way to the staging ground for the assault, we fight some dug-in troops and hit our super truck up against the tank. Amazingly, it wins that fight, but it gets fried in the process, and naturally we have an emotional moment. You know, for the truck.
Leave it! No!
Rihanna, help me!
We need to move on.
I can fix this!
We don't have time to waste.
After a quick glimpse of the KPA firebombing the suburbs, we then get to the base where it's decided we'll strap a whole bunch of C4 to our super truck's chassis and use that to blow the wall. This is also treated with some degree of sadness. Yes, that's right, there's more emotional setup and weight for this piece of military hardware's passing than there ever was for Boone. Thankfully, we don't have to go far to reach the wall because it's only 2 blocks away. After a hop, skip, and a jump down the street and through the kitchenless White Castle, we're there, and one breach and clear later, and I'll admit I still enjoy these sequences, they're a guilty pleasure. We take down the final roadblock, blow up good old Goliath, and make our escape. We decide to mourn our fallen comrade, and Boone, I guess, in the most appropriate fashion we can muster, a turret sequence, as we drive on to the next level. From here we drive straight to somewhere in rural Utah so we can get that helicopter. The loading screen radio montage warns us that outside of the occupied zones, people have gone a little nuts. We'll be fine, of course, though. The people we're going to meet were handpicked by Boone, and he was a great judge of character.
Nobody move! Oh, shit!
Son of a bitch.
Oh, right. Shit.
Asshole, don't even think about jerking us around.
Hey! Help me out here. We're fighting the same war.
Hey, you know, I'll tell you what. I'll take the bitch and Scarface hiding over there, and you can walk away without a bullet in you.
I think you're getting a bad end of that deal.
Yeah. So, once again, Boone's plan is foiled by outside contacts we're told Boone trusted implicitly. At this point, I have to wonder if he was just that dense, or if he was possibly a traitor to the cause himself, because it's getting ridiculous. Of course, if he was a traitor, he likely would have gotten off better than he did. Anyways, after the greeting party is cut down, Connor hands us a sniper rifle and reveals that he has known about the concept of stealth all along. Why he decided it would be best employed against a bunch of angry civilians rather than the high-tech and overwhelmingly equipped occupying force whose bases and resources we keep attacking is anyone's guess. At the very least, this sniper rifle is pretty fun to use. It's extremely accurate, a one-shot kill, and apparently whisper quiet to everyone but the shooter. It's completely unrealistic, and the cavalcade of fishes and barrels you're then told to shoot makes clear how painfully scripted this is, but big gun go boom man fall down. It's still very satisfying in that lizard brain sort of way.
Drop.
Less satisfying is the fact that they use this stealth sequence to show us how these guys are evil in a very blunt, vague, snidely Whiplash sort of way. They're cast as both opportunistic raiders, talking about selling you to the KPA,
Try and take him alive! The Koreans will pay more if they're still kicking!
as well as racially focused sadists who torture captured KPA soldiers. Never mind that these two actions feel very contradictory. Also contradictory is how your crew acts about it. Connor especially. He expresses disgust for their actions after watching them do a little Yosemite Samba with a hostage, and while that is not an unrealistic response to have, it does come off as hypocritical from the motherfucker who set up the firebombing of a whole platoon earlier. Similarly, the following acts of cruelty are then led by the nose through, while all obviously evil, largely feel like they pale in comparison to the shit we've seen the KPA do so far.
Just don't think about it. Just
Wait!
close your
Wait!
eyes.
I don't quite get the point of these scenes, to be honest. Is it to show us that both sides have the capacity for atrocity? To make us question the cost of rebellion? Or perhaps to build some sort of empathy for the KPA? None of those really ring true to me. It's pretty obvious both sides can and will commit evil acts, and thanks to the aforementioned firebombing earlier, we've seen that rebellion can lead to those acts, even if we didn't dwell on it long enough for our characters to express any sort of actual guilt. Hell, they even excuse their actions in that scene with some good old-fashioned whataboutism.
No one deserves to die like that. Where did you even get that shit?
Stole it from the Koreans. They were gonna use it in case of an uprising.
Then there's the idea that these bits are to make us feel some sort of empathy for the enemy, but in that case you need to show the KPA soldiers acting like human beings at some point. You can't go from grim, jackbooted thugs to put upon victims and expect the audience to make that leap with you. It all feels like Homefront desperately trying to take a stand on something, anything, but not taking the time to really set those ideas up properly and express those thoughts in a meaningful way. Instead, we get the sledgehammer subtlety of rednecks being cartoonishly evil, while any credibility this game's writing might have had gets shunted into one of those mass graves from earlier. Anyways, a few failed attempts to evoke some sense of outrage or emotion from me later, Homefront's exceedingly short attention span kicks in and has us decide to break stealth for absolutely no reason. This means it's back to the good old stop and pop cover shooting for a while as we take in the majesty of a bunch of burnt out trailers in what must be the grayest patch of land to exist in the entire state of Utah. I think some KPA troops show up during this bit as well, but they're disposed of as swiftly as they arrive. They're a complete non-factor. A few dozen dead grunts later, we make it to a church that overlooks the yard where the helicopter is being kept. The crew then splits up with the Scooby gang going down to infiltrate the area, while you go up into the church so you can provide covering fire. This doesn't seem like the best plan, considering of the group we're the only one with flight training, and you'd think getting us to the chopper would then take priority, but Jacobs is the silent protagonist, so this point isn't going to be argued anytime soon. At the very least, it's another chance for some more brain-dead but still lizard-brain enjoyable sniping.
Okay, Rihanna. Connor, one more. Okay.
Once you've appeased your id a little bit and taken down some targets, your crew manages to get to position, and then shit hits the fan, and you have to make your way down there, rather abruptly, running through a hail of bullets to the chopper before taking off to the next stage. The next chapter starts off with us in the helicopter, flying down the highway in a level designed to showcase why Homefront's campaign didn't have more playable vehicles. Honestly, that's harsh. The helicopter gameplay is totally fine, with the biggest problem being that it's OP as all hell, but in a boring way. You have infinite ammo, short cooldowns in your weapons, and while the movement feels suitably floaty, the actual controls are nice and crisp, so you're able to make adjustments very easily. In a better game, possibly designed around these controls, you'd be provided with challenges that would test your skills, but Homefront doesn't have those, so nothing can stand against you, and it all just feels way too easy. It's certainly better than the alternative, where controlling this thing is a mess and completely unpleasant, but it lacks even the moderate feeling of skill that the on-foot action provides. Anyways, we're now pursuing those tankers from earlier, and after a quick flight through a low-clearance tunnel, we take out their escort and hijack the trucks. This bit is janky as hell, where the helicopter essentially magnetizes to these trucks so your crew can hop out and commandeer them. But it's also fun to watch, in a very schlocky sort of way. It's like a scene out of a Cut Rate Fast and the Furious ripoff or something. If you're wondering how the trucks themselves didn't blow up when we exploded their escort, well, it turns out these things are as much tanks as they are tankers. Thank God, as you now have to escort them the rest of the way to San Francisco, and Connor is not a careful driver. It's genuinely impressive the amount of damage they can take, considering that the enemy APCs, tanks, and even the one attack chopper they throw at you all get torn through like paper by your aerial avatar of destruction. Nothing else of consequence really happens in this level, to be honest. The trucks slowly wind through a few city blocks while you annihilate KPA forces lazily, and eventually you get to a bridge you have to defend for a couple of minutes so Hopper can set up a bunch of C4 and blow it up. This bit is treated like a harrowing, desperate defensive situation, but you have a clear line of sight like a mile out. The Helo's guns are surprisingly accurate, so nothing ever gets even close to the tankers. The bridge then explodes with all the fire and fury of a cracker disintegrating into a bowl of soup, and we're off to San Fran on the final level. I was going to complain here about how weird it is that there's no talk of refueling at any point, as the trip from even the western border of Utah all the way to San Francisco is more than twice the average helicopter's flight distance. And I was then going to remark that obviously we couldn't just use the fuel in the tankers, as it's stated that's jet fuel. However, upon looking into it, I found out that helicopters generally use or can at least work with jet fuel. So, assuming we're still on that first tank of gas when we hijack the tankers, this plan still works. Kudos to Homefront for plugging that particular plot hole. Though, going off the writing of the game so far, I have a feeling that wasn't intentional. Also, I'm pretty sure at this point I've spent more time thinking about the logistics of the Resistance plan than the Resistance did at any point. Well, we're in the home stretch now, and immediately after we deliver the tankers, we get drafted into the big assault on the Golden Gate Bridge. One thing I want to note is that I do find it strange we're delivering these tankers to what looks to be a fully functional chunk of the US Army. There is talk in the game here and there of scattered US forces, but these guys don't look scattered. They have all the toys you expect, and there's no indication of a shortage of trained active soldiers here. It's made even weirder by the fact that they're set up on the occupation's doorstep, and we're apparently just waiting for us to show up with jet fuel. We saw the KPA bomb a suburb earlier, just to smoke out some rebels. I can't imagine they tolerate an active military formation just hanging out across the bay. More importantly, though, meeting up with the military here deflates things for me narratively. Ultimately, this was supposed to be a game about being a rebel. part of an under-equipped and outmanned guerrilla group, rising up to defeat an oppressive invading force at any cost. That sense of determined, to the point of almost being foolhardy scrappiness, goes out the window when you join forces with what is, for all intents and purposes, a very well-oiled, professional-looking military machine, even if canonically their numbers are supposed to be pretty small. I feel like you could have slotted in a Californian resistance cell here, and still made things work, while better maintaining that rebellious tone that was supposed to set this game apart from its competitors. Ah well, it's not like Homefront really holds on this interaction with the army long enough for the narrative dissonance to really affect things, though. That's because, much like the last level, very little actually happens here, and it happens very fast. We step off the tanker trucks and onto waiting helicopters for a very brief and out-of-place feeling Vietnam cliché, then drop into a half-hour blur of shooting. The team splits up with you and Connor at the bottom of the bridge, taking down a base it seems like we could have just driven to, blowing up a tank, and then working our way up the bridge supports to get to the bridge proper. It is only now in the 11th hour that Homefront ever really starts demanding much of you in combat, and gets clever with its enemy placements. These next few encounters are actually some of my favorite, as they force you to pay attention to your surroundings, because the game will start sneakily spawning in assholes with explosives to brighten your day, and will keep the pressure up on you from multiple angles. What follows is the push up the leg of the bridge, and it's similarly enjoyable, as it actually manages to maintain a solid pace, and just lets you keep moving forward if you're quick on the trigger. There's lots of corners to worry about to be sure, but they're sharp and shallow enough that you'll often be able to use that to your advantage and catch ambushing enemies. There are few things more satisfying in Homefront's campaign than turning one of these sky-high sharp corners and unloading around a buckshot to some KPA grunt who thought he'd be clever. Unfortunately, you will eventually get to the top and be on the bridge proper, at which point it goes back to being the sluggish, war of attrition shooting gallery that comprises the majority of this game and the majority of most military shooters. We push forward, they push back, and then there's explosions and debris everywhere, but it all feels very static. Those quick do-or-die corners from before are replaced with hiding behind cover and taking shots, and at this point Homefront will pretty firmly slap your wrist if you try to get cute with grenades or flanking or what have you. It becomes very tedious, and honestly I put a lot of that down to just the bridge itself being a very boring location. By design, it's a literal straight line, and you can only really do so much visually with cables and ruined cars. Near the midpoint of this death march, they do try to shake things up by having a chopper cutscene you off a bridge and onto the catwalk below, providing you with a quick few moments of fun again that culminates in the destruction of a couple sentry towers and shooting down that bastard helicopter. Please remember that Homefront is a shooter from the turn of the last decade. That means it was legally obligated to have you fight at least one helicopter. Anyways, its destruction leads into the penultimate moments of the game, despite the fact that really all we've accomplished so far is climbing up a bridge and then walking. Not even all the way across it, just like halfway or so. Regardless, the big door to where the AA guns are stationed opens up, and all hell breaks loose for a few moments. Before you know it, you're on the gun platform, trying to hold the line while Hopper rewires things. It is a tense moment that tries to feel like a big climax, but honestly, gameplay-wise, it's only marginally more of an effort than some of the previous stretches of the bridge. At the very least, though, your defense is rewarded with that other classic military shooter cliche, the C-130/unmanned drone blowing shit up good segment. Frankly, I always assumed this bit was meant to be unsettling in the original Modern Warfare. It's a terrifying expression of the power and disassociation that comes with current-day warfighting technology. Much like the white phosphorus scene from earlier, though, Homefront doesn't quite hit the mark tonally with this, assuming it was aiming for that feel at all. Instead, the scene feels righteous as you blink out white blips on the screen. I don't want to read too much into how this moment is presented because, honestly, I can't tell what the developers' intentions were here. But with the triumphant music blaring and the circumstances it's used in, it does feel contradictory to the questioning tone the game, admittedly somewhat fumblingly, tried to take earlier with its touchier subject matter. It also loses some impact just as a spectacle because functionally it feels like a less engaging version of the helicopter stuff in the last level. The viewpoint is very similar, and the potency of the explosions comparable. You've just got infinite missiles, locked movement, and the HUD is different now, though honestly not different enough to make it really feel like not just the helicopter, but easier. Regardless of the intended tone, though, like everything else in this game, it's over before you can really think about it. To that end, Homefront immediately works to gloss over any pesky, lingering thoughts you might be having with more gratuitous explosions. Connor declares that we have to leave our newly secured defensive position, so we all hop into a conveniently not blown up Humvee and drive forward into the remaining enemies. This brings us face to face with the final boss, an enemy Goliath. And as that fucking truck was this game's only truly sympathetic character, you can't help but feel betrayed. Seriously though, I'm torn on this boss fight as far as the impression it gives. On the one hand, we spent a good chunk of the game relying on Goliath and seeing it wreak destruction. So, having that turned against us is genuinely pretty harrowing. On the other hand though, we also spent enough time with our Goliath to get used to that destruction. And the game made a very big deal of us having to protect it against just fucking dudes with RPGs. And even that was just for it to end up as an extremely expensive car bomb. It also doesn't help that this whole fight is just a very scripted turret sequence, where you're expected to do nothing more than lay down fire and spam the missile countermeasures button until things are done. That point of doneness being when it eventually blows up and takes down your Humvee in the resulting explosion. From here, you're left to watch as enemy armor approaches, your doom on the wind. Connor wants his doom now, though, so he lights a flare and goes running at the enemy tanks, yelling at the army over the radio to have their jets target the flare and blow up the oncoming KPA. Cut to a big boom, a white flash, and a radio broadcast from across the pond, telling us that this victory, was almost certainly a turning point in America's fight to take back the country, and that the EU is going into session right now to discuss, maybe, possibly, we'll see about it, sending support to their Western ally.
The EU Defense Council has called an emergency session to plan support for our allies across the Atlantic.
And with that incredibly in-depth and satisfying ending, the credits roll and Homefront is over. We are left with some questions. Is Connor dead? Are we dead? Did we manage to take back San Francisco? California? Will we take back the country? Well, those are all to be answered in the sequel. Except they aren't, because the sequel is actually a reboot with an entirely different cast of characters and a completely rewritten setup for why and how the North Koreans managed to take over the United States. That makes the ending here both Pyrrhic, for the Montrose Resistance at least, and pointless, which is fitting, I suppose. There are a few things I didn't talk about with Homefront. The multiplayer, most notably. That was the big attraction for this game back in the day, and the part that received the most praise at launch. Of course, I've never been a big multiplayer guy, and more importantly, the servers are a complete ghost town, so, nothing doing there. I also didn't really comment on the difficulties, because this game largely plays as you expect for a military shooter of the time. For this review, I ended up playing through the campaign 3 times, twice on normal and once on hard. I also toyed around with the max difficulty guerrilla mode here and there. There were no big dramatic gameplay changes in any of that time, adjustments to things like enemy placements or density. As far as I could tell, it was just variables like player health, regeneration, maybe enemy accuracy a little bit that were affected. So, basically the harder you set the game, the harder will bop you with a newspaper when you try to play in ways other than the intended stop-and-pop rhythm of cover shooting. Despite all the crap I've just given Homefront, I don't actually hate the game. As I hit at the start, I think it's aggressively mediocre in almost every facet, and there's what feels like cut corners constantly grinding against the larger experience. But even so, that core idea of making a Red Dawn-styled military shooter, and doing so at a time that was the height of that subgenre, that's still interesting to me. While Homefront didn't execute on that idea very well, enough of the concept came through that I was still invested enough to want to pick holes in the story and learn the lore. The larger gameplay is also totally competent. Completely unoriginal, to be sure, and in comparison to its contemporaries, it lacks a certain style and character, but it does still manage to be broadly enjoyable. It's easy to shit on Homefront. I should know. I've been doing so for almost 8,000 words at this point. But underneath all the odd decisions and the game's general lack of focus and non-existent attention span, there is an interesting relic of 7th gen gaming history to be appreciated here. I wouldn't go so far as to say this game has a real heart to it, but it does feel like there were people behind it that cared, wanted to do something different. At least at some point before the realities of AAA game development and publishing had their way with the project. While I wouldn't recommend spending any money on it these days, if you already own it, and Humble Bundle was giving it away free at one point a few years back, then there are worse ways to spend an afternoon. And on that meandering note, that is the first cult classifications in the bag. Homefront was hardly the most auspicious choice to kick things off, but it did do a good job of setting the bar low, didn't it? I have plans to cover some more interesting things going forward, thankfully, though in this same format. I've already got a tentative list of indie oddities, forgotten mishaps, overlooked gems, and, of course, cult classics from my gaming vault that I want to review here. I'm also open to suggestions, though, so feel free to leave those down below if you like. Also, just to be upfront, this isn't my day job, and this kind of content takes some time to make, so don't be surprised if it's a while before the next video.